There we go. We're back again. This is Trap with World 740 Inc., CIDP Killer, here with a very special guest, Steve Wenger. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with me and doing this.
Hey, Trap, my pleasure.
So, Steve is one of the reasons that I'm alive today, because without you're helping Summer out and helping the doctors out with different treatment options, I wouldn't be here. I think what you do and what, Annie and so many others do on the Facebook support groups, GBS, CIDP Foundation International is a huge one. I'm a part of, maybe 5 or 6 others as well, just different kinds. And it's just, I can't thank you enough for what you did for me, and helping my wife and the doctors with different treatment options when I couldn't speak. I was fully locked in, paralyzed from head to toe, full trach, the works. So I know we've spoken and I've thanked you, but I can't thank you enough, brother.
I'm just glad I was able to, to throw something out there that nobody else was trying, and things that had worked for me. I never got to the extent where you were. I never got that bad. I was very close, probably within a day or two of getting in the trach. But I managed to. They gave me that rituximab, and that turned me around. And so I was lucky enough that I never got the trach. But like I said, I was right there. I was on supplemental oxygen. I was right there. So
I'm curious, and I want to circle back to that. I'd like to start with a brief, kind of overview of your whole story, but I do want to get back to treatment and rituximab and how you came upon that. Just because very recently I had treatment last Monday. I get it every 3 months, and I believe you get it every 6 months.
I get it every 6. Yep.
Every 6. So just recently, insurance the day of or the day before said, no, we don't approve rituximab because that doesn't go for CIDP or Guillain Barre. That's for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was interesting, but there's just not enough case studies published, that say this guideline or this could work for this. It's not in the writing yet. We are literally writing the book with our stories as we go. That's why I think it's so very important that we do this. And I know you talk to people every day. I talk to people every day on these support groups. And I think that's what it's all about is kind of paying it forward and education and getting it out. So tell us a little bit about your story. I mean, how did you feel and when did you know it was like hospital time, because this disease requires hospitalization?
I got my vax. I got the J&J vax on dogs. Sorry about that.
No worries. I hear my support dogs inside doing the same thing.
I got my vax, my Johnson & Johnson vax on May 18th of 2021. And by the 25th, we were up in Sedona visiting my sister-in-law. And I had to walk up this hill. And my legs felt like cement. And I just had a bear of a time getting up this hill. And it was kind of one of those things where really didn't think much of it. Maybe I'm just tired, whatever. Just one of those days. And kind of toughed myself through it. And day went on. This got progressively worse. And I started running into issues where I'd be walking along and all of a sudden my knee would buckle. And my knee would buckle, but I'd catch it. It started happening more and more often. And then all of a sudden my knee buckled. And one day I found myself laying on the floor. And this is over the course of about, probably the first 14 to 21 days. The symptoms started at 10 days. But this, it progressed over to the next 10, 11 days. Finally, it was about 3.5 weeks, and I couldn't walk anymore. And so my wife helped me out to the car, and said that, let's go to the hospital. And there's obviously something wrong here. And we got to the hospital, and I couldn't even walk in. I couldn't get on my feet to walk in the ER door. So I essentially crawled on my hands and knees through the front door of the ER. And the gal that was sitting behind the reception desk kind of looked at me like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, "I can't walk." I said, and they brought over a wheelchair, picked me up. And when I told them it was, I said I had the vaccine about 3 weeks prior, and this had all started. And they kind of, I don't know if I was just lucky, or maybe it was because I couldn't walk. Maybe it was because my symptoms were so severe. But they got me into the ER pretty quick. We had been doing a little bit of research online, and I said to the doctor, I said, I've researched my symptoms, and they seem to fit with this thing called, and at that point I thought it was Guillain Barre. And I'm like,
yeah.
Guillain Barre Syndrome. And he goes, "Oh, you mean Guillain Barre?" And I said, "Yeah." And we reviewed my symptoms. One of the telltale signs of Guillain Barre is you lose all your reflexes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
I'm sitting there in the hospital, or on the gurney or whatever it was, and doctor comes up with his little hammer, whacks me in the knee, and nothing happens. Whacks me in the other knee, nothing happens.
Exactly.
I started stretching my elbows and my wrists, and I had no reactions. My reflexes were gone. That's when they did the lumbar puncture, and came up with elevated proteins in my lumbar. And they admitted me into the hospital. I spent a couple of hellish weeks at that hospital. Would never go back there again, but that's a whole nother story.
I also have a similar story.
Oh yeah. And I finally ended up going to Mayo Clinic, and right here in Phoenix. I spent a month at that other hospital. I was spiraling downhill, getting worse, progressively worse. The treatments, nothing was changing. They were doing the same thing over and over and over again, even though it wasn't working. And,
which were what? What did they start with for you?
They started me on IVIG, and they were just giving me IVIG.
Yeah,
and it wasn't doing anything to arrest my symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
It kept getting worse. So I went to Mayo, and Mayo did they did, honest God, they must have done 150 different tests. I think they drew 4 gallons of blood out of me, sent it all over the country for testing. So yeah, they were sending samples everywhere, and they finally came back, and they started me on. Let's see. I'm trying to think what the first thing. I think they gave me some IVIG, even though we knew that wasn't going to work. And then they put me on. They put a port in my neck and put me on plasmapheresis. We did 5 rounds of plasmapheresis, which is supposed to be the cure-all. If you've got GBS, that's supposed to be the gold standard for getting rid of it. Did nothing to my symptoms.
Did you get worse or okay?
I got a little bit better, but the decline I was having, it was like every day I was losing something. Every day, today, now I can't lift my right arm anymore. Now I can't move my right hand anymore. And then it was, okay, now I can barely lift my left arm. Now I can't feed myself anymore. I can't, if I go to the bathroom, I can't go to the bathroom by myself because I can't wipe my butt. All that kind of fun, all that fun stuff. That was a humbling experience.
Yeah, and you've got the port in you for that plasma exchange or Plex as they call it. How did that feel? How was your actual treatment? How did it feel physically when you were getting those treatments? Did you have any reactions to those, either IVIG or Plex?
The IVIG, when I get it, and I still get it I get it every 14 days. In fact, I get it again on Friday this week. And the IVIG just makes me tired. It just takes it, it just feels like after I get it, I'm just really fatigued. It just really fatigues me. And pretty much once I get the IVIG infusion, I'm done for the day. That's it. It's ball game. My butt is parked on the couch and I'm not going anywhere and I'm not doing anything.
So just that one day of treatment, you feel that way with the IVIG?
Yep. And when I get the rituximab, which I get every 6 months, it pretty much does the same thing. Rituximab, it wipes me out for the day.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel it the second day, maybe even a little bit into the third.
Yeah.
But the really, get out of here, dogs, please.
They'd like to be on the show too, Steve.
It's like I've got one throwing a tennis ball at me, and the other throwing a sock at me to play tug. But yeah, it takes it out of me, and I'm with the rituximab. I'm down for a day and a half, maybe 2 days, and but I can feel when I start getting towards that 6-month window.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel the symptoms coming back.
Mm-hmm.
This past year, my 6-month was in October, end of October. And due to a move and insurance change, due to a move from Minnesota back to Arizona and transferring from Mayo Rochester back to Mayo Phoenix, my insurance got hosed up. And I didn't get my rituximab at the 6-month interval. And I actually ended up getting it end of December, which was closer to 8 months. And
wow.
I started into a full-on relapse.
Absolutely.
My legs started collapsing under me again. All the tingling was all just, I could just feel it crawling back up my legs, back up my arms. And just to give you an example, I can tell exactly what that relapse did to me. I can say exactly what it did to me physically.
Can you describe it for people that might be going through that now, that have, say, had treatments or are waiting for treatments, and they have, feelings that they can't quite explain to, say, a physician, or anyone really, that, they're not sure. They don't know. Can you kind of describe what it feels like when a relapse happens?
For me, it was my feet. I have a lot of residual nerve damage in my feet and in my legs. I have residual nerve damage. So I live with everyday pain in my feet and my legs. It hurts to walk. And you become acclimated to that. And you become, okay, this is just how it feels. And for me, I had that, okay, this is just how it feels every day. And when you walk, this is, it just hurts.
Yeah.
The pain started, my feet, all of a sudden, my feet were tingling more. My feet were becoming more sensitive again. When I first came out, if I was walking barefoot across the floor, if there was any kind of grit, let's say I'm in the kitchen and there's a little bit of, like the dogs bring in sand and dirt in their paws.
Yeah.
That sand, just that little layer of sand that you can't even see visually, was like walking on glass. And everything just got more sensitive. I could feel that tingling crawling back up my legs. I could feel the numbness increasing in my legs. It was just, I just felt all those old symptoms coming back and creeping up. And, and I was on the email with my doctors, and I was keeping them advised. And I told the guy, I said, and we were waiting for insurance to approve it. And I told him, I said, this is getting to the point where if insurance doesn't approve this by, say, Friday, I'm just going to go to the ER.
Yeah, it's ER time at that point.
He said, worst case, he said, you go to the ER, and then we don't have to wait on insurance approval.
Right. They sort it out afterwards.
Exactly. So that was my game plan. Luckily, they got the approvals, and we didn't have to go that route. So,
now, when you first started getting the feeling, let's say, day one, or not day one, but let's say when you were to where the point where it's time to go to the hospital, right? Something's wrong. Did that same feeling that you're talking about with the relapse? Is that how it started for you the first time? Did you have the ascending variant where it's the typical Guillain Barre? It comes from your feet upwards and it ascends. I know you have CIDP like I do, the chronic version. I had the Miller-Fisher variant where it started from my head and worked its way down. How did yours begin?
Mine was, I try and think back, and I don't even know that I had the numbness and tingling to start it with.
Okay.
I just all of a sudden one day, like I said, I was in Sedona, and all of a sudden it's just like, man, my legs feel like they're sandbags. It feels like my legs are sandbags, and it progressed from there. Now, when I was in the hospital, I'll never forget when I was in the hospital, and the numbness and the tingling was there already, and the weakness in my legs was there. But I remember as my feet were going numb,
mm-hmm.
when they were going totally numb, it felt at times like my foot was in a vice.
Yeah,
it felt like
absolutely.
My foot was in a vice, and it was just that vice was just just cranking down to my foot. It felt like my it was almost like it felt like my feet were going to break. It felt like all the bones in my feet were just going to shatter. That's how tight it felt like that vice was. And then that feeling moved up my legs. And I can remember laying in the hospital, and my feet would be cold. And
mm-hmm.
I'd call the nurse in, and it felt like, almost like I'm from the Midwest, so I'm used to cold. And I would tell the doctor, it feels like, if I've got a pair of shoes on, it feels like my feet are wet, and I'm walking in wet shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Like my feet are sloshing in wet shoes. My toes would feel ice cold. My brain is telling me my feet are so cold right now that I can barely stand this. And the nurse would come in, and she'd, grab onto my toes, and she goes, well, your toes are, you're toasty warm. I'd have a heated,
you're burning up here.
Yeah. They'd bring in those heated blankets, and they'd wrap my feet in those heated blankets. And I would be literally on at times on the verge of tears, because
Sure.
my feet hurt so bad from being crushed in this vice.
Yep.
And having this feeling of being frozen. And
that's amazing how many parallels we have in our stories. That's exactly how I described it to pain management, to my wife Summer, to the doctors, to the neurologist. They said, how does it feel? What's your pain scale? I'm like, I'm at a 10. I don't think you understand. And they're like, well, what does it feel like? And it's always the same thing. It's like my feet, my hands are in a vice, and someone's just cranking down on it. And,
yep.
Like you said, you can get used to pain, and you get used to walking on the glass, and that becomes the norm. But then there's also times when it gets to where there's like surges of pain beyond what you're normally able to tolerate.
Yep.
And I don't know if you experience that too, or when you relapse, if you feel like that, or when you begin to relapse, if that comes back for you, or does your IVIG at the 2-week mark keep that at bay?
I think the IVIG helps to keep it at bay. I do still get my good and bad day. I still have my good and bad days. I took a very aggressive approach to my recovery. I go to the gym. I work out at the gym. And
Mm-hmm.
when I first got out, I was going 5 days a week and trying to get back what I've lost. And I still, to this day, I go 3 times a week. In fact, today was my gym day. But I still have those days where how to describe it. I just feel really fatigued.
That comes a lot for me as well.
Yeah, I just feel really fatigued where it's just like, I'd really rather just stay here on the couch and just do nothing today. But I have to get up because I have to go to the gym and I have to keep, my routine going. And like I said earlier, like I had mentioned earlier before, when I had that relapse through November, December, and into January, I was able to track exactly what that relapse did to me, because when I work out at the gym, I have a logbook, and I log every workout I do. I log how many reps, the weight I was lifting, the repetitions I was doing. So I have a detailed history of my physical therapy, my recovery, going all the way back to October of 2021.
And so you did that when you were in the hospital as well, not just with your workouts. I know you keep a record, so you can reflect on it.
Yeah, this is just my workouts in this logbook. And so I was able to look at it and say, man, I'm lifting, today I'm lifting 60 pounds. I'm doing 60 pounds, and I can do it, if I do 3 reps, I can do it 9 times, and then 8 times, and then 7 times. And I can look back at all these different exercises, and that little month and a half, 2-month regression I had set me back almost 8 months physically, strength-wise.
Wow.
Set me back almost 8 months. And I've been going at it hard now since like mid-January, so almost 2 months, and I'm still not back to where I was in November. So I'm still working to get back to where I was pre-relapse.
Have you ever had a relapse that did require hospitalization again? And how far out are you from your initial release of the hospital? How long has it been for you? Since, rituximab treatment to, back home. How long have you been back home? About
18 months. Because I got out of the hospital the end of September of 2021. I was hospitalized from June 14th of 21 until September. I think I got out like September 30th of 21.
Okay. So I'm exactly half that. I'm 9 months behind you.
Okay. So, and it sounds, and like when we talk and you describe your symptoms, we're pretty much on a parallel track. Where you are today it seems like that's about where I was 9 months ago. So in fact, I think you might even be a little bit ahead of me, because 9 months ago, let's see, I was walking, that would have been 9 months ago. When would that be? That would be 6th to be about June. Yeah, I was probably I was using a cane. I was still using a cane at that point.
Yeah, I am too. That's where I'm at.
I had gotten rid of my walker. Yeah, I'd gotten rid of my walker probably in end of April, early May. And I
think that's one of the main things that people want to know, right? That are new to this. Maybe they're just now starting to get diagnosed with Guillain Barre or CIDP or AIDP. And I remember, of course, I'll just call her Miss K. She was awesome intake nurse at the ER and here in Loma Linda. When the doc came over, one of the neurologists who was amazing, later on did surgeries on me. He's like, we need to do testing, of course, but this sounds like Miller-Fisher Guillain Barre. And Miss K says, whatever you do, don't just look it up. Don't Google it. She's like, talk to people, talk to patients, talk to doctors. So what do we do? First thing we do is Google it. We want to know, what is this thing and how long does it last? And am I going to be back to me? And how long does that take? If so, right off the bat, they're telling us it's a long process. It's a slow process, and as we know, GBS, getting better slowly, it is so true. And people at the very beginning of their journey right now are terrified, one, because it's so scary not knowing. And two, they want to know, am I going to die? Am I going to make it? If I do make it, am I going to live or be able to live unassisted? Am I going to get back to me, back to normal, if there is such a thing, you know?
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I think it's so beneficial that we do things like this, so that folks in that position can say, hey, there's two guys right there that had I'm diagnosed with a very severe acute CIDP, and look where they're at. And I'm at a 9-month mark and you're at an 18-month mark. And, as we both know, when we jump on GBS, CIDP Foundation International, and there's a lot more, there's at least 6 or 7 other, support groups on Facebook alone. You look on there and there's people that are 4 months out. There's people that are 22 years out or 40 years out of the hospital, and it's so interesting and beneficial to see their timelines and their success and their recoveries, or where they're at and what's hindering them right now. Whether it's your body just hasn't come back, whether you don't have information. I'm trying to help a woman in South Australia that just doesn't have access to the right medical facilities. She doesn't have, knowledge of what this is and how to treat it. And that's another thing I wanted to circle back to you with. When 18 months, let's say 17 months ago, right? You're in the hospital for a month and IVIG isn't working. Now we know that takes, it's 1 day of treatment times 5 for that session, right? That it's typically, anyway, it's a 5-day treatment. Some do it in 4, but typically that's a 5-day treatment. I had that 3 times, 5-day treatments, right? And in the first time I got better. I was like, oh, it's a magic drug. I was able to, and I went in there not being able, I could fling my arms just with my shoulders, but my arms didn't work. I could not stand. I had to be lifted and pushed on a bed or a wheelchair. And then after the first round of IVIG, I was there for like 2 weeks, and I was able to, I put everything I had into it. I went up and down 12 stairs and they released me home. 2 days later, I flat on my face. It all came rushing back. And then another 5-day round of IVIG did nothing. Another round, nothing. And then that's where I got to Plex or plasmapheresis.
Yep.
Also still declined. I had 3 or 4-day rounds of that, and that just still declined. After the plasma, and 17 months ago, or maybe 16 months ago, how did you know to go to rituximab? Whose idea was that, or how did you hear about it?
That was through my neurologist at Mayo, and I was very lucky. When the first hospital I was at, they didn't have on staff neurologists, so I kind of had 4 different neurologists that would come through on a daily. It was a crapshoot onto who you get every day, and it was almost like they never
rotate.
talk. They rotate, and that's why my treatment went nowhere. When I got to Mayo, I had a team of neurologists. I had a team, and every day my team would come to visit me. And my team was, I had Dr. Zaleski, he would be like the lead. I had Dr. Grill, Dr. Zimmerman. Dr. Zimmerman was the head of the neurology department. And I had one other, I can't think of the other doctor's name. And then like 6 or 7 additional students, ones that are in the process. So every day I had like 10 doctors that would come into my room, and they would discuss with me treatment, what's going on, what's happening, answer my questions. It was an amazing team. And when they gave me the Plex, they hit me with Plex, they hit me with high dose steroids, and then they pumped me so full of IVIG. It was unbelievable. And they said, all right, and I had been there for about a month and a half at that point. They said, all right, you're good. Your symptoms everything is kind of plateaued and you're not getting worse. You're not getting better, but you're not getting worse. So they sent me over to rehab again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in rehab for maybe 3-4 days. And at that point, I was paralyzed all the way down. And the only function I had was I still had my left hand and a little bit of movement in my left arm.
Okay.
And it was funny because when I'd eat, it was kind of like I could pick my arm up, but I didn't have the strength or the coordination to bring the spoon to my mouth. So it's kind of like, you're doing one of these numbers and you're watching your food and it's just kind of flying around out here and trying to reel it in. Meanwhile, there's food flying everywhere. Well, I lost that ability. I woke up one morning and I couldn't move my left arm anymore. So now I'm laying here, like a sack of meat. And they had done, just before I left the hospital, they had done another surgery. I mean, they had removed a chunk of my sural nerve. And the sural nerve is located on the back of your foot, kind of behind your ankle. And it's just kind of it's a nerve that really doesn't do anything in your feet. So they took
kind of by your Achilles.
It's right by your Achilles. Yep. So they took out a big section of sural nerve, chopped it up, sent it all over the country for all these tests. And when my doctor from rehab called my neurologist and said, "Hey, you know what? His arms aren't working anymore." That's when my neurologist came back and said, "Okay, well, we've got a positive diagnosis. It's CIDP. It's confirmed by." The actual testing of that nerve segment they took out.
Interesting.
They took me back to the hospital, and I had one of the neurologists came in and they did a full neurological exam where they test everything. They test your strength in your arms, and everything is based on a scale of 0 to -5, or -1 to -5. -1 is everything functions as it should. -5 is there's no function at all. And when they did this neurological exam on me, I was a -5 from the shoulders down. So I was -5 from shoulders down. Nothing worked.
Yeah,
and
same.
That's when my neurologist came in and he said, "All right," he goes, "well, we're going to try something." That he said I had it. He had it one other. I think he said he had to do it one other time. He said, "We're going to give you this drug called rituximab." And he said, basically, it's a chemotherapy drug. He said, but it's not one of the real wicked.
Like the super poisonous ones or whatever.
He said, this one's going to go out and it's going to kill off all of basically it kills your immune system. It kills all the antibodies in your system. And it alters your B cells and they stop producing antibodies. And he said, we're going to give it to you. He said, but you're not going to see any results from it. He said, it takes a while. He said, figure 20 to 21 days before you start to see results. And he said, in the meantime, he said, you're just going to stay here at the hospital. I'm like, okay, great. So they gave me the rituximab, and doctors would come in every day. They do their neurological tests. And I'll never forget, Dr. Z came in on the 21st day, and he goes, all right, well, let's see if it's making any difference. And they started, looking for strength in the arms, and the neurological test takes about
the normal neuro test, yeah.
Yep, takes 30 to 40 minutes. And he sat down, maybe 2-3 minutes after he started it. He kind of goes over, he sits down in a chair, leans back, crosses his arms like this. And I'm looking at him. I said, let me guess. I said, so we're not seeing the results that you were anticipating. And his response was not even close. He said, in fact, I think you've gotten worse. And I'm like, great. So he goes, well, we're going to hit you with another dose of rituximab. So they hit me with a second dose of rituximab. And I think it was maybe 4 or 5 days after that second dose. I woke up in bed. I'm laying there, and I all of a sudden I look down, and I'm wiggling. I can wiggle the tip of my right thumb.
That's
Just
so
the tip. All I
crazy.
do is just wiggle the tip of my right thumb, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I kind of the nurse call button was this big round disc, and all you had to do was basically just put any kind of pressure on it. It would
Yeah,
page
like
the
the
nurse.
quadriplegic
Yep.
pad.
So, yep. I roll my hand, or kind of roll my hand onto it. The nurse comes in. Her nurse was Lauren, and Lauren was amazing. Lauren was with me literally from the day I checked into Mayo to the day I checked out. She was amazing, and she was she was there when I first went in, and she was there when I left. And I called Lauren in, and I said, "Lauren," I said, "you're not going to believe this." And I said, "Check this out." And I'm wiggling my thumb, and sorry, guys.
Don't be. Tell it how it is, Steve. Let her out.
I wiggle my thumb, and she's like, "Oh my god!" Of course, and she starts crying, and so there we are, both blubbering. And she goes out and gets one of the other nurses, and it's like I'm having a freak show, wiggling my thumb. And Dr. Z came in, and I showed him that, and he's like, "Finally!" And that was the first motion that I got back. That was the first thing that I was able to do that the CIDP had robbed from me.
Same here. My right thumb. That's so crazy.
And over the next couple days, I got more and more movement, and I started to be able to move. I still had no strength. I mean, I'd been in the hospital now for, going on 90 days probably at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so all my muscle mass was gone. I mean, I'd lost almost 80 pounds. And,
I lost 40 in muscle myself.
I didn't have a lot of strength and movement. And, but yeah, they got me out of there after, I think I spent another week. They were keeping me on the IVIG, and I finally got to go to rehab, and I was at rehab for another 2.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to finally go home and then start my rehab, on my own. And like I said before too, I went to they had me set up for physical therapy, and I did I think two rounds of physical therapy, and I decided I wasn't going to do that because it was the pace that the physical therapist had me under. I would have been in that. I'd probably still be in that damn wheelchair. And I'm impatient that way. I'm impatient that way, and I just decided, to hell with it. And I did my own thing, and I worked, and it's worked for me. I don't know that it would work for everybody, but it was worked for me, and it was a rigorous rehab schedule that I put myself under, but it worked.
Yeah, and I think it's important. If you're going to do it by yourself, to me, it was important to go first, because before they released me as well, and most people, you have to go through rehab somewhat to even get clearance to leave the hospital. And then whether you continue that at a long-term nursing facility, which they were pushing for me, and there's no way in hell my wife or I were going to allow that to happen. Yeah. She wanted to be my caretaker at home. And but I did get a whole lot of knowledge, that I could use at home. And I did go to, PT and OT came to my house, even RTs, because I still had a trach when I came home and a peg tube in my stomach. So nurses came to the house, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and respiratory therapy all still came to my house for a period of months. And once I got strong enough to get past that, I went to, outpatient rehab where I would go to a facility for an hour once a week and then come back. And I just stopped doing that maybe a month ago, into where I do all those exercises that I can do on my own from home. I just needed the knowledge. So
Yep.
I don't want to advocate not going to rehab. I certainly think it's important to get the basics down of what can help your body, what can hurt your body. And another thing you have to know, and what I'm still learning to this day, is the fine line of how far to push yourself. And I'm sure you had to, I don't know if you had to figure that out the hard way, because you push yourself hard at the gym. I know, I have, even in daily life now, if I'm going to attempt to put a shed together with my buddy and my father-in-law and my son, I got to know that that's going to drop me for 4 or 5 days. If I exert myself a certain amount at this stage that I'm at now, I have to account for a 3 to 4 or 5 day,
Yep.
I'm done. I'm laying in bed, feet elevated with my stupid boots on because my foot dropped, all that sort of thing. So did you have to find that out the hard way, or did you just know I can work out this amount and be okay tomorrow?
I found out what, at least in my case, was when I would work out, I always kind of pushed myself as hard as I could go. And and there were days, where where I was a train wreck the next day. But I found out that if I pushed myself to that point, it's almost like I'd be a train wreck for a day or two, but it was like I got over a hump.
Yeah, it's like a benchmark.
But there's still, like you said too, it's, the fatigue, like what you're talking about, where it's 3-4 days to recover. That fatigue is still there. I still get that. I work a part-time job. I work 20 hours a week, and they have me and I work 5 hours a day, and they have me on a schedule where I work Tuesdays and I work Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
And you stand and work? And do you stand and work assisted or unassisted?
I stand for work. So I work at I work in a hardware store. So I help people when they come in. So I'm kind of walking around the store.
No cane, no walker, nothing.
No cane, no walker. I just load up. I load up on the gabapentin beforehand, and I'm usually loading up on gabapentin at the end. And by the time Saturday rolls around, by the time I'm done Saturday, I'm done. I am done. Those 3 days, the fatigue just kind of piles up, and by Saturday, I'm wiped. And Sunday is just I don't do anything on Sunday. I can't do anything on Sundays because I'm wiped.
That's your healing day. Yeah.
Yep. And that goes even into a little bit into Monday. So it takes me, I work those 3 days, and it takes me a day and a half or so to get back going full steam again. So and whether that'll improve or not, I don't know. But
yeah, I know. Yeah, there's so much more. I know you're on a bit of a time crunch. I know you have other meetings. So, and thank you for taking the time out to do this with me today. Like I said, for me, it's a huge thank you to you and other people like you that put your time and energy into helping other folks. So that was huge. I don't know how much more time you have, but there's so much more I want to dig into with you. But yeah, we need a couple more of these because I want to follow up with a lot of things for you as far as the filing of the CICP. We'll get into, if you're willing to do another one with me, I'd like to get into React 19 and vaccines and start to finish, and then life after the hospital. I know we just started to get into that a little bit right now. But for people that are still at that scared, terrified moment, and even people that are just getting out of the hospital and they're thinking, what's life like now? You know, because my life changed tremendously.
One thing I do want to tell people is if you think your injury or your CIDP, GBS, if you have any suspicions that it may have been caused by the COVID vaccines, you have 1 year from the date of vaccination to file your claim with the CICP. So make sure that you do that. Open your claim with CICP. In fact, the meeting, as soon as I'm done here, I've been very active with lobbying Congress, lobbying Senate. I've met with, it's probably 40 different members of Congress in the Senate. I was in Washington, D.C. 3 times last year, meeting with people or with members up on Capitol Hill. After I'm done here, I'm traveling down to my local congressional rep is Paul Gosar, and I've got a meeting with Paul Gosar in about 45 minutes.
Okay.
And so I'm meeting with him regarding CICP because if you've been injured by the COVID vaccine, you know as well as I do, there's no help out there. Nobody cares. Well, it seems like nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear about it. The financial implications have been huge. For me, this little bout with CICP has probably resulted in about, I'd say a shade over $300,000 is what the financial impact has been to me over the last year and a half. Is close to $300,000.
Yeah,
and that's money.
Amazing.
That is actual money out of my pocket. You know, and what I've paid. What I've had to pay. Debt I've accumulated.
And still paying.
Wages, and wages that I've lost. The lost wages. Are
Absolutely.
Huge.
Absolutely. So I think awareness is huge. And like you said, people, I don't think it's that they don't care, because obviously you're having meetings and we're having discussions. So there are people that care, but awareness, getting the word out is huge.
There are people that care, but unfortunately the ones that can make the changes, I don't want to get into politics too much, but I'm just going to say this. I've met with Republican and I've met with Democratic representatives. And I'll just say this. The Democrats have no interest.
Okay.
I have had,
fair enough.
I've not had one member of the Democrat Party do anything to assist us, help us, or even show interest for that matter. We go into these. I've been into these offices, and they just sit there, and they sit there, and I'm talking, and you can just see it's going in one ear and out the other. They're thinking of something else when I'm in there, or when we from React 19 are in there. The Republicans, have they been a lot of help? No. We've at least gotten them to send letters to HHS. I did speak to I spoke to Peter Marks at the FDA, or at CDC, whatever he's at, FDA. And, but the awareness is building. The truth of these vaccines is starting to finally come out. And I guess the hardest thing for me to understand is, granted it's highly political. COVID vaccine is highly political. It's a hot potato, and really nobody wants to hold on to that thing.
We'll dig deep into that on our next episode if you're up for it.
Yeah, that works. Let's do that. I could go on and on and on and on.
I posted a video on my Facebook about some of the research that I want to say came out of Health Canada. It's a very interesting listen, or if you watch the video, and I'll maybe post a link to that. But in the meantime, thank you so very much, Steve, for everything you've done for me.
Thanks, Trav. Yep.
I will never forget it. And thank you again for this shirt. You've sent me several. I wear it proudly. CIDP Warriors all day. Is there anyone you want to...
Happen to have my GBS shirt on.
Yes. Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out, say thanks, anything like that, or promote before we get going? And then I'll tag your stuff when I get this all done and uploaded.
Well, I obviously want to throw a shout out to my wife. Amy has been amazing through this whole thing. We've been married going on 36 years. When she took those vows for better, for worse, in sickness and health, I know she meant it, because we have had the for better, and we have certainly had for worse. And so, yeah, when she took those vows, she meant it, which is huge. She stood by me, never questioned anything. Thank my daughter. My daughter, when I was in the hospital, my daughter's an RN. She uprooted her family. They all moved to Phoenix. They were out here for a year, and Erin helped me with my recovery and my rehabilitation. Thank the doctors, the nurses at Mayo, the RNs. Thank all the nurses. The RNs.
They're amazing, aren't they?
The nurses and the RNs are amazing. And I tell people, I attribute my sitting here. The doctors come in and they get the glory, but it's the nurses. It's the RNs. They're the ones who are in their day-to-day taking care of you. And,
absolutely. Flipping you over, wiping your ass. I mean, helping feed you. The respiratory therapists for me were amazing. Shout out to Charlie and Christian and Joe. You guys are awesome, as you know. And some of these people have become very good friends of mine just because they're so amazing, and I couldn't be here and not have them in my lives, So thank you to those people out there doing what you do every single day. Thank you. It's really quite something to give and be kind and help others like you do. It's really amazing. So thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate you. I'll talk to you. I'm curious after we get off this, after your meeting. I want to hear about it, but thank you so very much. And till the next one where we dig deep, I'd like to get into those other things we said. Again, this is Trap and Steve getting after it with Rolled 740 Inc., CIDP Killer. Thank you, everybody, and be kind. Thanks again, Steve.
Well, thanks.